Our next speaker is the 2015 National Teacher of the Year, Shanna Peeples. But she didn't, yes. But Shanna didn't necessarily start saying, I want to be a teacher. No, she started as a disc jockey. And she transitioned to a medical assistant. She then moved into pet sitter. She also was a journalist. Before eventually, as Shanna says, teaching chose her. Shanna knows a lot about what she's doing, and that's why she was last year's Teacher of the Year. But her experiences are unique. She now teaches at the Palo Duro High School in Amarillo, Texas, and she spends half her day as a high school English teacher and the other half mentoring, coaching, hand-holding, and working with her colleagues so that they can grow in the teaching profession. At her high school in Amarillo, her students come from many, many different backgrounds. Amarillo is one of those cities in the U.S. that helps refugees find new paths in life and gain access to critical resources. As a result, Shanna works with many students who speak English as a second language or have recently entered the United States from a different country. As the 2015 National Teacher of the Year, Shanna is truly shaping the conversation in this country about working with students in poverty and across English barriers, and has been working with those who have already faced extremely tough challenges in their young lives. Please join me in welcoming Shanna Peeples to the stage for the first Ed Talk this morning.
Jeremy, thank you. Oh my goodness. Good morning, everybody. It is amazing for me to be with you this morning, and especially to welcome the 2016 class of Teachers of the Year. Well, I wanted to bring a story to you from Texas, where I'm from, and from my childhood, if you'll indulge me, that shapes how I look at education. So when I was a kid, my sister found this cat. And there was a lot wrong with this cat. I knew that because I had seen it drinking antifreeze out of the driveway next door. You know, one pupil was bigger than the other when you looked at the cat. So I knew it wasn't right, and she named it Gary. So, a great name for a weird cat. So, Gary, one day, true to his name and his background, decides that the best thing to do is to crawl up into the engine block of my mother's Grand Prix on one cold Texas Panhandle morning. Now, my mother, unbeknownst to her, came out and started the car, and when she did, Gary got caught up somewhere in the car. And if you've never heard that sound before, it's quite jarring, let me tell you. And so my mother, true to form, her response to all emergencies was to burst into hysterical screaming and crying, which brought my father. And my father, true to his form, whenever he heard my mother be like that, he treated her as if she was on fire and he just needed to put her out. He was always looking for the quickest way to make things maybe not better, but to make them stop and be quiet. And so he turned to me and he said, "Have you seen my shells?" And I realized he's gonna shoot into the engine of my mother's car, which made my sister burst into hysterical tears. So now we have this chorus of noise going on. We have this hysterical screaming and crying. We have a screaming cat. We have my father muttering obscenities, searching for his gun. And I think, God in heaven, I've got to call the only person in this family with any sense, and that's my grandmother. Now, for a woman so calm, and partially that's because she was medicated to be that way, she could drive like NASCAR. So she drove this Delta 88. And when I called her and told her what my dad was about to do, she knew she had precious few seconds to get there before this whole thing was going to go south in a bad way. So she got there and did the one thing that no one else thought to do, which is to pop the hood on the car. And she looked in and saw it wasn't that bad after all. That Gary was actually just kind of, his little head was kind of caught in the fan blade. So she turned to me and she said, "Here's what I need you to do. I need you to go in the house and I need you to get a towel and a pillowcase, which sounded so much better than a gun. And so I did that, and I brought it back to her, and she said, now, here's what's gonna happen. I'm gonna take the towel and I'm gonna wrap it around Gary, and I'm gonna use that to get him out from under the fan blade, and I need you to hold the pillowcase open. I'm gonna put him in that because he's gonna be really scared and he's gonna hurt himself or other people. And then we're gonna get in the car and we're gonna go to the vet. And that's exactly what happened. And the vet saw that he had just a little cut over his eye and stitched Gary's little eye up, and he lived out his long, very weird life as the thug cat of Wilshire Street. Now, why do I tell you that at an ed policy conference? Well, to me, that story illustrates how we respond to problems in education in this country. It's the three responses that I've noticed the most. Certainly the hysteria and the screaming and the tears. There's a lot of that, especially in the spring when social media seems to be nothing but why I quit posts. Or there are a lot of shotgun solutions to problems in education that we are fond of, these damaging yet efficient ways that we deal with things. I think there are precious few people who approach it the way that my grandmother did, which to me is true innovation. For me, my grandmother is like an innovative thinker because she was able to, as Tony Wagner says, solve problems creatively. But I'd take that a step further. Solving problems creatively with an absence of fear, using what you already have, purposed in a different way. And to me, that's what she did, and that's what we need in education. Tony Wagner also said that we no longer have a knowledge economy. We have an innovation economy, and the world doesn't care about what you know. It only cares about what you can do with what you know. And that's critical for the types of students that I teach, and really the majority of public school kids are just like mine. And teachers all around the country are facing the same challenges I do. They're facing kids who, as Indiana University found in a large study, that up to 90% of them are bored and disengaged in school all of the school day. When they talk to teachers, they find out that 2 of every 5 teachers, especially at high poverty schools, are leaving. One of the things that shocked me after I came back to my campus after a year of being away as a national teacher was to see those numbers play out in real time on my campus as I watched some of the best teachers on my campus going out the door for transfer. So that's a real thing. And then the teachers who do stay say that they don't feel like the professional development that we give them applies to their lives. But even more scary, and something that I've seen as I've talked to children who are thinking about going into teaching and those who have started and then quit education programs, is that the 3 biggest pipelines of new teachers in this country, New York, California, and Texas, are seeing steep drops in teacher enrollment programs. Because those kids are getting the message, as one young lady told me, that to be a teacher is to check your creativity at the door and your intelligence, which chilled me. Because I thought what we need more than anything is innovative thinking, and even more so for the kinds of students that I teach. I don't call myself an English teacher, I call myself a literacy salesperson because I feel like I'm in high pressure sales. I'm always running this race between my curriculum that's largely based around getting 16 and 17-year-old, usually young men, usually non-English speakers, to pass a test, a standardized test. And many times they come to my class having failed it 7 or more times. And I'm in a race with places like Blue Beacon Truck Wash in Amarillo that promise these young men that they will give them up to $20 an hour in tips to pressure wash cattle trucks. Now that's a very real equation for many of the students that I teach. Do I sit here where nothing but failure is what I've experienced? Or do I go where somebody values, maybe not my brain, but at least something about me? And that is why I say that innovation is an equity issue at its heart. I love the way that Pedro Noguera describes the difference between equality and equity. He uses this idea of shoes. So he says equality is as if we dumped this whole thing of shoes in front of a bunch of kids and said, there you go, equality, everybody has shoes. But equity is that the shoes fit. And that's what innovation is. Innovation is making those shoes fit for every kid. And I think that the only way that we can do that is by remembering 3 simple things that we already have. We're just not using them well. Kind of like my grandmother's idea of the pillowcase and the towel. And that's the way that we use time. And that's the trust that we give each other. And that's teachers as coaches. So on my campus, my principal made this deal with me. She said, if I shift the schedule, will you teach all of your classes in the morning and then coach in the afternoon? And I said, sure, as long as that coaching doesn't mean that I'm one more arm of the testing octopus tentacle. And it has been one of the best things that I ever did. I was able to work with teachers and shore up those teachers who just needed a little bit of work, like David, who when I started working with him, my principal was ready to fire. But after working with him and identifying some things he wanted to work on and giving him relentless positive support, just like I would my students, David went from being burned out to fired up in 3 years and became a statewide literacy trainer. What can you do with the teachers on your campus? The ones who really believe in this, who really are ready to make those shoes fit, who are the most innovative and creative thinkers, and here's how you'll find out who they are. They're the ones whose cars are still there when you pull out in the evening. Those are your teachers who will make those shoes fit. Those are your passionate teacher coaches. But you have to give them time. And time is something that we say, oh, we don't have enough of that. We do if we use it well. I noticed when I became a department chair, I tried to do what I had seen done. And what I had seen done was some pretty not so good modeling. And that's adults standing up in front of other adults, and in my case, 30 adults with English degrees, and reading things to them off of an agenda. Like, you can't wear jeans at school except on Friday with a Spirit shirt. And that was being taken up, that was taking up my time week after week after week. And it's when I made this firm commitment to not waste time, to hold true to this idea. If we are in a room together and we are looking at each other across the table, then we are able to be vulnerable with each other, we are able to be creative with each other, we are able to innovate. But that's only if I move all of that other, as it's been called, administrivia off into other spaces, into things like consent agendas, and use apps like Voxer to take care of that other stuff, but to treat that time together as sacred. The last idea is trust, and sometimes that seems to be the hardest one. Trust is something we struggle with in this country, and for some reason, really struggle with it around teachers. There's so much fear in this country right now. Fear that's being exploited and used because it's cheap and it's easy, and anybody can do it. Anybody can tell you a ghost story about everything that's going wrong. It's the creators who have a hard time getting their voice heard. And those of you who are creators know this, and that's why you're so tired. Creativity is difficult, and it takes a long time, but it takes trust, and you cannot have trust if you're afraid. As I've traveled as national teacher, one of the best things that I have found is that all over the world, the people who do this work are the same. I don't care what language you speak. I don't care what your culture is. You, like me, believe that hope is something we create by standing at our doors every day. You believe that the seeds that we plant in our students are going to grow and bear fruit in a better world for all of us. And that doesn't matter if you're a teacher behind a wall in Gaza with rocket holes in your ceiling, or if you're in a poor, isolated school in China where you're not getting regular paychecks, or if you're in Peru digging the wells for your school, you're the same type of person. Or if you're in North Amarillo, just trying to find ways to keep boys out of Blue Beacon truck wash. We have to honor and trust that commitment, and trust teachers for the professionals that they are. Teachers are artists of human potential, but more than that, they are warriors. They're warriors of hope that do battle against despair, and we need them more than ever now in this country. Only teachers stand at the doorway and look at kid after kid after kid and say, "You matter, and you're worth everything that we invest to make that happen." In these countries all over the world that I've visited, one thing becomes clear: they believe deeply in education as the only way out for many of them. Peru, definitely, because they are at the very bottom in any kind of scores. There is this huge energy and push towards getting their teachers up to speed and investing in their schools. And that's true in China as well. China, they were somewhat disappointed that I couldn't give them a magic solution. One principal got very angry at me because she kept saying through the translator, "Just give me one thing, just one thing. Tell me one thing we can do to improve." And I said, "Trust your teachers." And she asked my translator to retranslate that because she couldn't believe it was something so stupid. Trust your teachers? What? But it's true. And we have to trust each other and stop blaming each other. Brene Brown, who is a fellow Texan and a social scientist, says that blame, as it's defined in social science research, is the discharge of pain and discomfort. And it is painful, and it is uncomfortable to work with human beings in the very human enterprise that is teaching. But if we trust each other, it can be done. So I want to leave you with a story that I read about the Y2K phenomenon, if you remember that. So everybody panicked and they were terrified about the new millennium. And they said, "What's going to happen to us in this new millennium? It's so scary." And they went everywhere. But one group gave what I think is the best prediction: the Elders of the Hopi Nation, a Native American tribe who gives their predictions in earth metaphors. So they said this new millennium is like a fast-moving river. And because of that, people will be terrified and they will cling to the banks. But those people who do that will suffer. It's only those people who let go and who float out into the center that will be okay. And the good news about that is that when you float out into the center, you're not the only one there. If you look around this room, that's all of us. And to me, that's what gives me hope. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be your colleague, and thank you for everything that you do that makes hope real for children all across this country. Thank you.